Hi there. Welcome to episode 5 of Sea Lawyer Station. My name is Jose Mallari. Did you know that Fortune 500 companies have been using strengths-based training to increase sales, profit, and customer engagement while reducing staff turnover? Strengths-based training is also widely used in higher education to improve student retention. I will be joined today by Marc Otto. He is a subject matter expert on strengths-based training. If you want to learn more about strengths-based training, stay tuned and please hit the subscribe button. Thank you. So, welcome, Marc.
Great, thanks. Good to be here.
What is strengths-based training?
Good question. Kind of the short answer about strength-based training is really, I may start with the negative first, and that is we find that a lot of employees are not super aware about what their greatest talents are. They're far more aware of what maybe their weaknesses are, what activities drain them. Employees that focus on their strengths are 6 times as likely to be successful in their role, up to 15% more productive, 3 times more likely to rate their life as more satisfied. So a highly engaged workforce helps companies be successful. It reduces waste in terms of a lack of productivity. The instrument, like highly engaged workforces, correlates with profitability, productivity, shrinkage, turnover, correlated in 2020 to health and wellness metrics, meaning having an engaged workforce and employees that are highly self-aware, other-aware about where they need to be spending their time, where their best is, like maybe what weaknesses they should be managing. That productive workforce just really is like an engine at a company and derives all sorts of good metrics and good things. So strength-based training is really helping employees be far more aware where they should be spending more time, where they're above average in performance areas, average, and then we teach strategies to manage weaknesses in areas that maybe they lack some competency, or how we build teams where a lot of the different people work together in this sort of synergistic kind of like more productive than they would all add up to individually, because you've got the right people on the right bus going the right direction with the right people in the right seats. So strengths-based training is really helping employees be far more aware of what they need to do to meet their own psychological emotional needs, what they need to do to have more energy, resiliency at work and in life, and then how that works in all the different ways with different people with different strengths to create that team synergy, the team performance, where quite honestly, even if you've got some sort of average producers, if you put them in the right team in the right way, you can get far above average results if you've got that chemistry right and you've got the people playing in the right roles and the diversity on that team really covering the areas where there's a lack of, sort of a lack of performance in some areas. So employees don't have to be awesome at everything, but we really want them to know where their best is and where they should be spending their time, where they get confidence from, where they've got high levels of competence, and where they fit on the team. So strengths is really, again, the primary purpose, I would say, is to create a highly engaged workforce, but it's space to really reflect on what do I do really well, most naturally. Because again, what we do well is often more, it's sort of less conscious. It's just sort of the way you flow, the way you work, the way you live. It's your natural way of sort of navigating work. And again, we find that employees are not super highly aware sometimes about what their best is. They tend to be aware of what they hate or what they don't like, who they don't like, what tasks sort of take a long time for them. But the best for the company, the best for the employee, the best for your health and wellness is really finding out where your unique spot is on the right team and in the right role. So it's really about creating a highly engaged workforce and using the diversity of talents together in this synergistic way that creates a lot of momentum and productivity for a company.
By the way, Marc is the founder and lead consultant of Strengths Consulting Group.
Yep. Yeah.
what services does your group provide?
Yeah, great question. So there's three primary services, I'd say four actually. The fourth we do, I would say, maybe only 20% of the time, but it's my favorite to start with, but that's with Gallup's Q12 Employee Engagement Survey. And where most of strengths is focusing on what's sort of right, the Q12 will give you a couple factors to look at in a department, a division, a team, a region, a classification that maybe are some low factors that are almost preventing a strength-based culture, as well as the assessment gives you a look at what that department, team, and on and on and on is really, really good at, so you can further develop what they're already good at. But the Q12 is a service we provide Q12 consulting, so that's big picture engagement consulting. We can cut that data any way we want by VP, by function. We can cut it by classifications under lots of different leaders. We can look at engagement performance, in a lot of horizontal, vertical ways. Again, we can cut that data any way we want, as long as it's more than 4 employees on a team. That Q12 instrument also tells you about 3 types of employees. It tells you, what's your percentage of your workforce that's highly engaged, meaning they come to work and they're pretty fired up to, get some stuff done and build and make things or serve others. It tells you about your percentage of not engaged workforce. And those are, we sort of joke, nobody punches their time cards anymore, but we sort of call them time card punchers. They sort of like check in, check out, they're kind of doing the minimum, to get a paycheck, but they're not engaged, but they're, sort of showing up. And then the third, so you've got engaged, not engaged. The third percentage we get as we look at a workforce is the actively disengaged group. And those are sort of, people that make life hard, I think, like on everyone. So it's, Gallup at one point called them cavers or cave people. And the idea was that they are consistently against virtually everything. So they come actively to spread negative energy. And we have certain numbers we kind of want to, that we try to keep in these ranges, but we can see what percentage of a workforce is actively disengaged too. So that's Q12. Let me go a little faster, sorry. Then we provide keynote formal trainings, customized for departments. Your department in particular too, we focused a lot on wellness, a lot about health, how, using your strengths every day can lead to kind of your personal health, your team health, department health, which then allows to drive, community outcomes better. If you get healthy people, healthy teams, I think you get better outcomes. So we do Q12 consulting, we do keynote trainings, formal trainings customized for the industry department, the goals and challenges of that department, and sort of coming down to get more specific. Then we provide team building that really focuses on building a higher self-awareness and higher role clarity for that team about how they work together, how they engage each other, understanding how different people get things done differently, but it can be brilliant in the way they do it. So we do that kind of team focus there too, and then going all the way down to one-on-one individual strengths consulting. And the goal there is usually 3 things, and that is really to look at, number one, how do these unique strengths work uniquely for this person? So in the Strengths Finder instrument, your top 5, the statistical sort of rarity or possibility to have that individual top 5, not in order, is 1 in 287,000 odds. To have your top 5 in order is 1 in 33 million. The odds are 1 in 33 million. So what we're doing there, our goal is to figure out how do these strengths work uniquely for this person. Then secondly, how do the themes reshape each other? What are we call theme dynamics? Is there a core theme in their sort of top 5, top 10 that sort of reshaping how those strengths work, or is actually, even if it's not in the number 1 slot, a core theme can actually, we say, be more powerful than some of your top themes, meaning some of those top themes can actually serve that core strength. So we're looking at that. So how does it work uniquely for the person? What are the theme dynamics for that person? Is there a core theme reshaping it? And then thirdly or lastly, what is a goal that we could work on together, either life or home or work? If we help an employee with personal goals, we get a better employee at work. If we help an employee at work, we're hoping we get a healthier employee at home. So those are the 4 services: Q12, Keynote, custom formal trainings, custom team experiences, and we have several formats for that. Individual coaching, one-on-one, those are the primary services we do.
I think I heard you say something about Clifton Strengths.
Yeah.
What is Clifton Strengths? Why is it named that? And is it the only way to measure strength?
Yeah, great question. There's other strengths indexes out there. Some I actually really like. I think the history of the Strengths Finders, I remember it was Don had been reading Maslow in the 50s and was super fascinated by talent. He could see that the trend in psychology was headed towards the negative, like what's the problem, what's the diagnosis, and he felt like, wow, we should be studying what's right with people, equally, if not at least alongside with what's wrong with people. Mm-hmm. So he had a company, I think it was called SRI, that was really like Science Research Incorporated, I believe. Again, Don Clifton, but he was wanting to study talent and was psych department chair at the University of Nebraska and was challenging his students to study talent and the potential of people. And so that's why he built his company. It was then bought out by Gallup. If I remember right. But it's an instrument that was released in the early 2000s. There's 33 strengths that show both human potential, but also what we like to say psychological and emotional need. So your strengths, we say, are what you bring to life and work, and they're also what you need from life and work too. He really wanted to, there's this kind of twist in the story that I don't think it always gets told, but Clifton was really trying to find the right top 5 by position and industry, and that's what they were after, was to correlate, behavior and outcomes with industry by top 5. But along the way, I think there was maybe some disappointment that it didn't predict behavior as well as they wanted. So, people could have their strengths but be oblivious to them or not execute directly from them. The instrument doesn't test your self-awareness. It's your 177 questions about what your greatest potential is. Who, by the way, your parents, your friends, your family are not the best people to tell you what what energizes you and what you can do best. You are. So it's not externally validated instrument, but it's testing what's going on inside the person taking the assessment. So the way our company, I think, uses is a bit more than any other company I've ever seen in the strengths sort of industry, is we've really focused a lot on the strengths revealing your psychological emotional needs. Where a lot of companies focus on the performance of that employee, the outcomes of their role, how do we measure success in that role, are they achieving that? We do that as well, but we actually start with it backwards. So we start looking, what does this employee need? What do they psychologically and emotionally need more of? And part of that's my formal training as a social worker. I've been a social worker my whole life, and have always wanted to serve, at-risk, underserved populations. That's where my heart's at completely. So what we learned is by using the instrument backwards with a lot of social workers that sometimes go through trauma or they see things, they kind of see things that most people never want to see, even once in a day. Sometimes they will see that multiple times in a month, some pretty severe kinds of things. So we quickly jumped in and used that instrument to go, okay, what does this employee need, and how do we create a specific plan for them to meet their own needs, for their mental health, physical health, social health? How do we care for these employees in a very specific, tailored, individualized way for what that person needs? And we've done thousands and thousands of these self-care plans for particular people based on their individual needs, to keep our workforce healthy, to help workers move through trauma, to help workers have better engagement and outcomes with children and families. But we do kind of use the instrument a little bit backwards. We're really proud of that actually too. And it's funny, but if you look at the data on how the instrument works, I think the data supports that it works backwards better. That the instrument's more predictive of someone's psychological emotional needs than how good they are at any sort of type of thing. So that's how we use it at Strengths Consulting Group, and then we do the performance side as well. But we really kind of start with like, hey, how do these strengths work for you? I think just one little plug I'd give for the instrument that I like about it is that there's so many psychometric indexes around. I don't know if there's thousands, but there's hundreds. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the Strengths Finder, the Clifton Strengths Finder assessment for me, what it does better than nearly every other index is that it gives you clues to your uniqueness and your individuality. You know, I would say most other indexes I feel like they're putting 8 billion people into like 12 or 16 boxes, you know, and it's sort of interesting from that perspective, but I think it's more interesting to have an assessment that's going, okay, we want to understand the uniqueness of this person, both what they can bring and do, but also what they need psychologically, emotionally. And this is one of the best assessments at sort of figuring out what does this individual employee at this giant company, what do they need differently than anybody else in the world? This is an assessment that helps towards that degree. So I think probably I have individualization in my top 10, so it's probably my own fascination with how different people are, how interesting that is, that we're all different, and really coming to a place where we trust those differences and not trust those, that we're aware of those differences and utilize those differences in the right way at the right time, the right sort of, volume and pitch and sort of, just create sort of music with talent by having, everybody working in these kind of beautiful. It's funny because all these companies I work with, they're like, I wish there was something that could help me figure out how to, do this job better or work with this other person. And the instrument does really well at both those things.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Mark, before we proceed, I'd like to express my gratitude. I'll give you a token of my appreciation, a box of chocolates for you.
Fun. Thank you, boss. That's brilliant. This is my favorite ice cream.
Oh, good. I guessed it right.
You did. That's awesome. That's
good.
Nice job. Chocolate chip mint.
Yeah.
That's good.
Thank you. Now, you are widely known as a subject matter expert on strengths-based training. Now, you mentioned being a social worker.
Yeah.
I wonder if you would let us know you more personally.
Yeah.
By maybe giving us a brief life story.
Sure.
Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
Yeah. Sure.
And how you ended up being a consultant in strengths-based training.
Yeah, good question. So I was born in Portland, Oregon, and I grew up around Seattle, Edmonds, Linwood area. Mm-hmm. And we had a beautiful home. I think it was one of the former mayor's house of Seattle, big circle driveway, a gorgeous home. Yeah. And one day when I was 11, I came home and my dad had taken off and just left our family. It just broke my heart. I mean, it was a really kind of heavy change. So
no warning?
Mom would probably say the warning signs were there, but I think as kids, you sort of you kind of have rose-colored glasses a little bit. Yeah. And, I didn't imagine a world in which my dad would ever just sort of leave my mom or us and just take off, but he did. Okay. He stayed in touch with us regularly. But for me, what it meant is sort of this, going from this beautiful, sort of like really iconic home, to an apartment where, quite honestly, my sister then, instead of having her own bedroom, she slept in a closet. I slept on the floor next to my mom. And so that's where I think my heart and watching my mom, process all that. And that's where the social work heart grew in me, was sort of like, seeing, I remember her in tears one day driving to get, some government aid. My mom says she chickened out. Like she turned around, went home and didn't want to do it. She wanted to prove that she could kind of do this on her own, take care of us on her own. Mm-hmm. But that's where my heart grew for others. I remember one winter, embarrassed because we were in, Kmart, and mom was waiting for the blue light to go off to get me my jacket. It didn't occur to me that other people that would see me would also be there, could be embarrassed, but I was sort of embarrassed, but it was sort of that yearly kind of like, mom's saved up all this money just to buy me that winter jacket, and some I don't think we were ever food sort of concerned or food at risk, but we went from having too much to having very little, and I was like, life's hard for a lot of people. I want to work in a way that my work and my life impacts people who have less or have a harder road or deal with anything. But that was where my heart grew, was when we went from a big house to the floor for me, and thinking, there's other people out there struggling. I want to help them. So, and we were the gracious beneficiaries of a lot of giving of others, actually, to be honest, too. So there were lots of people that came by with food and clothing, and I think that instilled in me helping others too. And both my parents have always focused on serving others in their community. This is a bit more to share, but it kind of completes the story, or kind of connects to the story.
Sure.
And that is, so when my dad took off, I started going to the library every single day to read books about relationships.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's an 11-year-old boy trying to put mom and dad back together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or at least understand it.
Mm-hmm.
But so I went to the library every single day after my dad left, that I could, to kind of read and find books about relationships. I really wanted to understand, like, why does this work and not work, or what happened. So when I started my company I started consulting in 2008, I started the company in 2012, but none of my friends were surprised, because the company had a very relationship focus on it. The strengths were to build stronger relationships. I basically told a lot of people I'm starting a relationship company to help people have better relationships, to work together more effective, to help people and teams and departments work through conflict.
Is that this group?
So we still brand that often, that really we use strengths to build powerful relationships, and we believe those relationships will drive your company's outcomes and goals.
How did you come across it?
Well, I think that's what I'm telling you, because it's that 11-year-old boy that finds strengths and then finds.
Oh, so it existed before. I never heard of it. When I was young.
It didn't exist, but I think when you think about a boy that's been hurt by a relationship, who's then nerding out, literally nerding out on the science and study of human relationships, it was two very easy dots for me to connect. One with about improving relationships, because I'd been doing that my whole life.
Oh, okay.
Right? And then with the StrengthsFinder assessments, which I thought was one of the best assessments at figuring out what people psychologically and emotionally need. Those two dots, Steve Jobs says creativity is just connecting dots. Mm-hmm. So I've got the dot of the hurt in my childhood, right? Where I want to have great relationships. I want to help people have great relationships. With the dot of the science of the StrengthsFinder were two very easy dots for me.
How did you come across the StrengthsFinder?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. So, so in 2004, I was the executive director of a nonprofit here in San Diego, and and had gone from kind of being this failing social worker, where my heart was in it, but there's a ton of volume and administrative talent we need to have employees effective in that positions, and I honestly struggled at it. But I went from this job as county social worker to executive director of this nonprofit through tons of privilege and knowing people. And it was there I began to really fail and struggle, though, in that role. I was trying to do the job like the previous executive director. I was trying to do the job like I thought it should be done. I was paying very little attention to my natural wiring and how I should be doing things based on how I'm wired. And I would say the company, amazing company, by the way, did one of the most gracious things probably it's ever happened in my life. They didn't fire me. I think I was likable. But they said, let's get him 3 consultants to help him out. So I always joke, I'm kind of high maintenance, but worth it. And my wife always was like, yes, you're high maintenance and you're worth it. She's a little slower on the second part. She always thinks it's so funny. But they brought in 3 consultants. One was dean of the business school. Another guy was a PhD named Clary Kinsler, and he brought his friend, a guy named Chip Anderson. And Chip Anderson, also a PhD, I think he was teaching at Zeus at the time. Chip Anderson was one of the lead researchers at Gallup under Clifton. So that's how I got into this. So they brought in Chip Anderson, Dr. Schooling and Dr. Kinsler to support me. And they said, we want you to meet with Chip. And so I sat down, met with Chip, and Chip's like, hey, I would like to meet with your team. And I was like, sure, no problem. And but then I had a little panic the night before he was going to do the training for me and my team. And I felt like they were going to use this instrument to fire me because I had no execution talent until you get to like 11, and it's a Ranger at 11, and a lot of that stuff's last second or under pressure. So I was like, oh man, this instrument doesn't look good on me. I was kind of embarrassed by it. But I had no training with it, so I didn't know it, but I started to panic about this assessment. And that next morning he met with me and I think about 12 of my staff and began to kind of tell me what I'm going to tell you in just a second. And that is, you know, and kind of the backstory is before as he began to train, so I have connectedness, intellection, input learner, or connectedness, intellection, communication, input learner. So I'm kind of a talkative nerd. So I asked so many questions during that training with Chip Anderson, again, who'd studied under Don, particularly in their school division for Gallup. And I made Chip cry. I made Chip break down in tears. Yeah, and I was like, oh, goodness gracious. I felt kind of bad. And through tears, he scolded me. He's like, Mark, I need you to listen. And I said, okay. And he goes, what you don't know is I have a huge tumor in my chest right now. And the doctors have given me less than 6 months to live. And through tears, he said, you know, if our research is right, most people will die before they know how beautiful they are. And I was like, wow. And then again, through tears, he said, you know, I don't have a lot of time, but I have to spend every second of the remainder of my life helping people know how beautiful they are. And that had a profound effect on me. And he did pass away about a year later, but I got to spend a bunch of time with him that last year, really studying under him, asking him questions, exchanging research. And when he passed away, I said, that's what I want to do with my life. I want to help people know how beautiful they are.
That's good.
So that's how I got, that was that connection between being executive director there, failing, and I got to get coached by, you know, one of the early researchers of strengths and a guy who was passionate about helping people know how beautiful they are. He's a very spiritual guy, very religious guy, and he had said that he believed God had put a diamond in every single human being and that it was all different, it was gorgeous, but that it was always covered by something. It's, you know, and part of how he saw his role was to help people return to see all the natural beauty and talent inside of them that maybe they've been made to feel bad about or teased about or gotten in trouble for actually. But that was part of his mission, was to help people see the beauty in them and to get kind of clear all the muck and stuff away so that individual beauty of each person could sort of shine. So that's, I picked up Chip Anderson's sort of mental, and that's when those dots connected. The dot between my hurt and my hopes and my sort of life mission or life purpose.
Based on our past and present interaction, I can tell you have that passion and your willingness to help and sincerity, and I admire you for that. Now going back to your consultancy services, you deliver one-on-one sessions, group workshops, executive coaching, retreats, and conflict management. How do you decide which format is best for your various client needs?
Yeah, great question. I think, you know, this is kind of, I wish my staff were here because they would know exactly kind of what to say and what I would say. But I think a lot of consulting is just listening, really listening, and listening to understand, listening to support. You know, and a lot of companies aren't well known for management or executives being great at listening. So a lot of times the answers for a company or department are already there. And a lot of times the actual lenses that managers and executives put on, or earmuffs, kind of prevent them from seeing or hearing some of the messages and answers that are already there. So as an outside consulting group, that's our role, is to listen and listen well, and to see both what are the visible and invisible forces that are sort of like getting in the way of culture, a culture that drives productivity and outcomes, a healthy culture. That is done by listening. So it's kind of funny too. The company where we met too, they brought me in to work between two large divisions, thousands of employees, or 1,000 at one department, thousands at another department. They brought me in to consult, and it was a really funny, I thought it was funny, but awkward meeting where they're like, "So what are you gonna do?" And I was like, "I have no clue." They're like, "We're bringing you in as an expert consultant. You don't get to answer, you don't know what to do." I go, "Oh, well, don't worry about that." I go, "What I'm going to do then is listen, and I'll have my staff listen, and I'll have this other consultant I'm working with listen. And we'll get together, and I promise I'll have 1,000 ideas of what to do." But that comes from listening. Like I'm not going to say I know how to fix a problem from the outside, because others have tried and they're usually wrong. So it's that's my thing, is we will know what to do when the data and the voices and the opinion arises, and that guides our consulting strategy. I mean, we've got like models and tools and strategies, don't get me wrong, but I kind of threw myself under the bus a little bit, because I was like, no, I don't know, because that data comes from, I don't like to go into companies with pre-made solutions that that are usually going to be too broad that they'll fail anyway. So we make sure to under promise, over deliver. So but yeah, I said that comes from listening.
Just like a doctor or a mechanic, you got to diagnose, right? Look at the
Fair.
symptoms.
Yeah, and the doctor might be the better metaphor there. Because I think I'm thinking of like one of those the chip readers.
The tester,
where you do get like a kind of data driven assessment. Right. And sometimes the Q12 is a little bit of that.
Okay.
So, the numbers in the Q12. The numbers in the Q12 turn a lot of mysterious emotion into like measurable strategic things that you need to focus on strategically. But when it comes to people, I would typically say, I want to interview at least 10% of that department, ideally 20%. Let's make sure we've got some good diversity of people, background, positions. I want to make sure that's representative of the department. But that's where we usually find the solutions that most companies, teams, departments need are usually there. It's just, again, it's hard for them to hear, just by the nature of the different roles. So
that's a good point. Your mission statement emphasizes relationship improvement. As a driver of outcomes. How does that inform your design of workshops or coaching interventions?
Great question. So the design of the workshops formed by that, in that one of our top 3 goals for any training is that people get to know each other better at the training, that people appreciate each other better at the training, that people see each other in a more nuanced, beautiful, sophisticated, appreciative way from that training. So that's part of that. So we build that right into the design. So there's time during our trainings where you are processing with different people about different things, and ideally leave knowing someone a whole lot better at work, because you're like, oh, that training, not only did I learn more about myself, but I learned a lot about my team and kind of how we work and don't work, and maybe some things that our team needs to work on. So we do build that into our training. Anyway, I think we do try to, like a great training for us is where we go through the evals and the data. I'm not always a big fan of evals. But we get tremendous evals. So right now, our last year, we hovered between 95 and 98% satisfaction and very satisfied rates in our trainings and our one-on-one coaching. So we typically hit it out of the park. But a great training for us is where people leave with this sort of sense of wonder and curiosity about who they are and maybe what they could be doing differently or more of. And that curiosity or wonder multiplied as they think of other people that they spent that day with about their potential and their potential together. So we really try to design these trainings to really shape team improvement after them. And then a lot of coaching sometimes is the support after those trainings to keep that sort of early wonder or curiosity or energy in place with some accountability, so that there's some results that can come from a really powerful day where you're learning more about yourself and others.
You mentioned coaching. Can you walk us through how you translate a client's Clifton strengths into a personalized coaching strategy?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was trained under Gallup's early first coaching system. I think it's called Coaching for Performance. They've changed their structure and the format of how they train coaches now. But what's interesting, for over 3,000 people I've met with, we've worked with over 55 companies, billions of dollars in revenue. And I individually coached over 3,000 people at least 3 times. So I've got a lot of time on the one-on-one coaching. And then probably 2 or 3 times that number in terms of employees we've trained. But just one-on-one, I've met with over 3,000 people. And what I've done is I've kept the early structure that I was trained by Gallup in place. Mm-hmm. And what's nice for me with that is, as I meet with different employees, different companies, different industries, things stand out very quickly to me about how this person thinks or feels or functions very quickly, because I've done this the exact same way with thousands of people. So I kind of like that I committed to the early structure they taught, because again, I've got like a massive baseline. So their answers or the way they answer, things jump out very quickly to me about things to pay attention to in regards to how does this specific person work. Then the process, so that's the process itself. Then the questions within the interview have to do with powerful, meaningful, largely unconscious experiences where you're using your strengths both at home and work. And we go slow with that. So we've met and you've coached me, so you know that probably in the two stories we went to look at how your strengths work at home and the 2 at work, we probably spent an hour and a half or 2 sessions just on those 4 stories or 4 questions. And that is to go slow, to pay attention to how does this person work in a meaningful moment where they're being productive. How does it work consciously for them? Like, because a lot of that's unconscious. You're just in your flow, you're doing your thing. And in fact, I can remember some of our stories we talked about right now. So it's kind of fun to remember. And it allows, I think the coaching is designed to help us figure out how your strengths work uniquely for you, but it's also designed for you to figure that out. So there's times where we're exploring this together and we're sort of like, okay, in that moment, do you think it was more this strength or this strength at work, or both? Yeah. And why did you change your approach to this? It sounds like you changed your approach to something. And, I remember you at one point going, well, it was my restorative learner, Mark. I changed my approach in this thing I was doing because I was learning that my particular approach was not working right in this one area. Yeah. So I thought, I need to switch it up here. And I thought, that's just brilliant. That's how learner restorative, that's how that combo is supposed to work. It's like your learner has an open mindset, and it's like, you know what, this isn't working. I need to change my strategy here. And to your credit, you did. So the process itself allows people's strengths to sort of, I kind of want to say, for me, become 3D. I'm taking notes the whole time, but the way my brain works, it's like, okay, I can see how I could help them apply that in another area of their life, pretty quickly. And then the questions within the process itself are bringing forward the way your talents work, home and work, in very unconscious ways. And the really interesting thing about that is, even though the StrengthsFinder instrument, I would say, one of the weaknesses of it, or one of the critiques it gets, is that when people retake it, they tend to change. Some of the top 5 will change off. They go, where did those go? So we like to coach out of the top 12 or 13 because we get far more stability in that sort of range. But I would say the interviews we've done, for the last 15 years, the way in which people operate that data has actually, I think, been stronger than the actual statistical reliability on retake assessments of the Clifton StrengthsFinder. Meaning our notes on how people work, that has held up far better than I ever thought it would be over the last 15 years. So. But it is all customized for how does that strength work for that one person. I remember an executive, very high level executive, just got promoted at our place of work, and it was kind of fun. Like, I'll brag for just a second, but probably 7 years ago, I saw her and I was like, she is one of the most kind, fair, strategic, gets work done, makes it look like one of the most amazingly talented people. But she didn't quite fit what the culture of the leaders was at that time. But I just kept telling her, like, you've got it. Like, you need to be in a leadership role. You need to, we need you, basically. And, watched her promote 2 or 3 times. Now she's going to have, probably 8,000 people under her at some point. So, but I remember her sharing a little bit how she works, and she's like, I got dragged to go skiing with some friends one time. I didn't sense that maybe she fully wanted to be there, or she was a little intimidated by it, but I remember her saying, I sat on the deck and I watched and I studied people's weight and the angles in their knees and their bodies and how the ski angles work. And she's like, I just paused. I did nothing but study it. And she goes, I went out, had a great day, figured it out. It's a simple story, right? It's not like super vulnerable. But it's a sweet story. And anytime this emerging amazing, one of the most emotionally intelligent executives, I think, at this organization, which I think is highly needed because it's becoming more rare. Mm-hmm. When she gets sort of overwhelmed or isn't sure how to do something, I just say, hey, remember the ski deck? And I smile at her. And she's like, oh, Mark, okay. And that's her cue. You know what? Don't do anything right now. Sit back, study, watch, wait. And both the confidence will come when she's ready. But that's a type of coaching that I'll do down the road when I know that person and how they work, how they don't work. I'll be like, remember the ski deck? Let's go sit on the deck. Let's not do anything. Let's just watch. Don't jump in and try to force this. Like I want you to watch it. We're going to have better decisions, strategies, outcomes if you just stop and just watch for a little bit. So it's fun to figure out how people work. We're mysterious creatures. We are not cars or robots. There's a lot of sort of mystery to how we operate. But a lot of the research on unconscious behavior, suggests even up to 42% of human behavior can be very habitual and unconscious. A lot of that's the data that if we can pay attention to, we can help drive, measurable outcomes for teams and individuals. But it is really going slow, listening well to figure out when this person's in their natural state of flow, doing what they're wired to be doing, what's going on and why.
Okay, let's go a little bit higher level. Sure. How do you customize strengths-based training to various sectors, such as healthcare, technology, nonprofits, or government organizations which you have worked with?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a couple things there. This I do take an internal and external approach to. The internal answer will be the same one I gave you and in terms of listening. Yeah. So I'll listen to what's the culture of their language, of their thinking, and how they get work done. So I've got a lot of nerdy strengths, so you really come in to listen and learn. Okay. And so then externally, a lot of times then I'm adding a lot of reading and study to kind of understand their industry. I remember working with a software startup too. We're trying to figure out how to monetize the API and kind of how to do that. Mm-hmm. And I spent a ton of time reading and studying to learn about not writing code, but really, how APIs work, how they don't work, ways other companies have monetized them, ways in which you can let external, software writers use them to build things that maybe you didn't plan on building. So a lot of that, in fact, one that comes to mind is I worked at a mental health department. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I could tell they were a little kind of skeptical on the science of talent, because I think that's a lot of how, you know, groups that contracts run therapy, like a lot of that's your natural training, sort of question this stuff. So I was a perfect person for that too, because I'm already on that team. You know, that I think that way as well. I'll tell you how it works and it doesn't work. And, but they were really talking a lot about mindfulness, a ton of mindfulness. And so I just talked a lot about the Clifton StrengthsFinder with the language that they used as sort of work mindfulness, as sort of being mindful about what activities energize you, what activities drain you. We collect that data. We encourage people to collect their own data about what energizes and drains them, because we call that writing your next job description. So that's your natural flow, is to think about what gives you energy, what gives you life. If nothing does, you know, we need to talk about that. But the data of what you know, what happened, what are you doing when time disappears, what gives you energy, what do you like doing, what are you interested in doing, that we really want to pay attention to that, because that's really sort of the DNA of what that person should be, you know, their right seat on the bus. But I would say, so my nerdy strengths, you know, input learner, connectedness, intellection. Well, connectedness becomes a little bit more nerdy for me because I have input learner and intellection. Those are just eager to figure people out and to listen, but also to study how industries work, how they don't work. And Buckingham Marcus Buckingham wrote a great little book called First Break the Rules, where he shows that a lot of really dramatic breakout performances across industries are the dots between industries. So I've had a lot of fun working in a lot of different industries, because I'll go, why do you do it like that? Like, I just learned about, you know, this thing over here, like, have we thought about doing it that? So that's fun, because then you can connect dots across industries, because industries have these cultures, right, where they all sort of operate. Sometimes they're legal constraints, but they have these invisible cultures too, where this is just the way this industry does that. When you can work in other industries, you can sometimes see that for what it is, and that's just a cultural norm. It's not state, county, you know, penal code directed. It's just how that industry works. And you get an opportunity to, you know, push on that or try to change some different things too. And it's fun to bring in executives from outside areas too, to see how they might do something different in this space versus this space. But so anyway, kind of a nerdy answer, but like, it's about listening, studying people, how the people works. I call them the P's. So the people, the problems, the politics, the processes, the products and services. It's really kind of figuring that out. And then my nerdy strengths, like going, okay, how does this industry work? You know, what are some problems with the industry? What are some strengths from the industries? How do we help, you know, this company move forward in a healthy way? But we try to use. I just wrote a bunch of trainings for public health nurses, and studied. I wish I could remember the actual name, but there's an industry that does leadership training within the nursing industry, and I spent a ton of time going through their literature to look at how, you know, they brand and talk and think about health and wellness for nurses in that industry, to make sure I'm, you know, speaking their language, if you will, and connecting those ideas with what we do. But yeah, we tweak. Yeah, we'll. You know, we're always meeting with the executive or management team to hear what their goals and challenges are, but then we're listening the whole way up and down, and then connecting the dots to try to get, again, right bus, right direction, right seat on the bus. I think earlier you'd asked something about like the culture, you know, how strengths drives culture. And I always like to say that, you know, the reason why there's this famous quote, you know, that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and it's attributed to several people, Drucker, Wagner, others, but it's still a great quote. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. It is a good reminder that you can have the best company with the best vision, the best mission, the best strategy, but if people don't like being on that bus, they may never arrive at that destination. So that's why culture matters, and that's why culture is such a big deal, because, you know, people are fighting on the bus, they hate the bus driver, you know, I mean, people will leave that company, they'll leave that team, even if everything else is like the strategy, the vision, the mission are solid. Culture is in many times more powerful than those other strategies, because again, people being on the bus matters. You're going to spend a lot of time in that bus.
Mm-hmm.
So our Strengths Finder assessment, is to improve relationships. It is to drive employee engagement, but it's also to create a culture of engagement, a culture where people are seen, they see each other, they feel valued, they feel appreciated. That organization plays to their strengths, helps them manage their weaknesses, and hopefully, we have great leaders for them to report to, because your boss tends to affect your engagement. Up to 70 to 76% of your happiness at work is really influenced by your boss.
You mentioned industry. Is strengths-based training applicable to the armed services industry, like military, law enforcement?
Yeah, we just wrote for Mike Gray and RTC. We just wrote a self-care training that we learned how to use the strengths to figure out your psychological emotional needs. We studied what activities people do to meet those needs, and we just rewrote a lot of that curriculum for law enforcement, including how the strengths relate to trauma, both in how certain strengths are affected by trauma and certain ways in which those same strengths can help people navigate through that trauma as well too. Because we want people to know, if you're a high achiever and you have a very traumatic event, we see it going one of two ways frequently. They're either working way too hard and overworking, to sort of suppress some of the trauma, or we've seen it in a less frequent option where people who are highly productive suddenly feel like they can't get anything done. So we want people to know that a lot of these things are normal responses to trauma, because then we can say, hey, we need to deal with this piece in your life right now to help you be what you need to be. So, and that may be a therapist or something totally different from us, but we want to be really good at helping unique people find unique solutions that help bring them to the best of who they can be and who they are.
Do you think there are sectors or industries to which strengths-based training may not be applicable?
Great question. I haven't found one yet.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, because every company is comprised of unique people,
okay.
I don't see an industry where it wouldn't be relevant. Now, Gallup did put out a bulletin, I believe in 2020, basically saying some things that they had said quietly in the trainings, but I saw in an actual letter, encouraging strengths consultants to not work with companies where it's not supported at the top. They're like, kind of don't waste your time, don't waste their time. And I see great value in that. I do think in fact, I think part of, I just went to this company right now in finance. They're phenomenal. It's probably one of the best. Over 55 companies, there's only been 2 that the more I got in, the more I was impressed with the company. Like usually, the more you get into the company, kind of the more trouble spots you find, or you're hiding this, or this is a problem. But one of these 2 companies that I've been meeting with, I've just gotten more and more impressed the more I've gotten into the company. But they didn't know strengths at all. I mean, the CEO did, and he said, "Man, Mark, we want to bring you in. My company's really going to embrace this," and they have, by the way. But that's a company that was great, like amazing before I ever showed up. I mean, talk about right bus, right people, right seats. They have just figured it out, and incredible diversity too, like just incredible diversity. It's super impressive. So I would rather work with a company where maybe they don't know strengths, but they're doing some things right or really well to begin with, and to build that better and better, than an organization that talks strengths, but hires assholes or hires their friends. Like, I don't need to. My connectedness strength would be violated by that. And it's been interesting too, because I think one of my things I'm learning this year is that my core strength is connectedness, is that I really am not having as much fun as I want to in industries where I'm less passionate about. Like I really want companies that are focused on products and services for people, who are hurting or at risk or not healthy, or I've been in some industries where I'm like, I'm helping this company out, but I'm not. But I can tell my connectedness isn't quite as connected when I don't feel like that company's really serving the community, basically. So I've turned 3 or 4 companies down just in the last few weeks, even though I need the work. Just because I'm like, I can't. I want my time to be with the right companies in the right industries where we can kind of change the world, literally, because we were supporting that one company in that one way at that one time. So that might be the downside of my connectedness strength, being pretty snotty or picky about who we work with. But I really do, if I'm going to be great, my team's going to be amazing at what we do, we want it to be with the right company doing the right things in the right way that is serving the community. So
that's good to know.
Yeah.
I agree. Now you mentioned earlier about 98% client satisfaction.
Yeah.
And having saved 180 million savings for your clients due to employee retention and engagement. Can you share an illustrative success story which brings those numbers to life?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways in which we're kind of expensive. Actually, I don't set the rates for the industry. I think they're kind of embarrassingly high. So we are expensive. But I just had a conversation with an executive recently. I was like, well, what do I need to do to convince you that we will save you more money than you're going to pay us? And I really mean that, because when you look at like the average mid-level corporate manager is making 130 grand a year, plus comp and benefits. So that can run anywhere from 26 to some places 40% of your total comp and benefits. So let's just say, I don't know, $175,000 is what an employee is going to pay for this mid-level manager in many different industries. If that employee is not engaged, you might be paying them $170,000 a year, but your equitable productivity from that employee relative to your high performers, you might be losing 70 grand a year on that one employee because they're not engaged. They're just doing the minimum, and maybe they're shopping online. Maybe they're not working very much because they're not engaged, or maybe their boss is terrible, so they're not engaged. Maybe they could be an amazing superstar with the right team and the right boss. Those numbers add up in terrifyingly fast and massive amounts, where the amount of money companies pay to disengaged employees, ends up being billions and billions of dollars, across the planet. Billions to the U.S., and for an individual company, it can be, it can be huge. So what we find, in our surveys, like we go back to that employee and ask questions like, did that coaching session drive your engagement up? Did it contribute to your health and well-being? Like, how much more productive do you feel like that coaching session helped you? In those numbers, so that's just on like weekly or monthly employees. So we got 98% of our people that meet with a coach one-on-one saying it makes them more engaged. Those numbers, if we have a position where we can actually measure the productivity, when we can measure that productivity, we find that one session, the cost of one session with one person per month, saves at least 2 to 3 times that amount per employee per department. So, we had found that typically our costs are under 10%. Basically 90% of what a company is going to spend on us gets returned back to that company. So I don't even know how to explain this to you in bigger terms. And this is just on monthly productivity, taking somebody who's not engaged to engagement. And the number there is, if we can increase that productivity 10%, that's where we're getting the 3 to 4 times return on your investment to pay for one coaching session. You're getting that 3 to 4 times, that same amount, 3 to 4 times back for what you bought. So that's just on employee engagement and productivity. The second place when we can, we'll measure retention, is on that full annual of, say, the $175,000. Like, did that employee go away? Because it depends on the industry, it depends on the position. It could be anywhere from 50% to 2.5 times their annual salary is the cost for turnover. These are pretty standard numbers. So you lose a high-level employee at $175,000 a year. They're not high level, but they're upper management. Wouldn't be unknown if it's like a software company or a tech company. It's not at all like out of what's researched and plausible that you pay 2 times for that in a specific position for specific industries, meaning that company just lost not $175,000. That company lost, over $350,000 for that one employee. So that is then measuring the cost of retention and the cost of turnover. That is expensive. And so when we can study these numbers, we're looking at, are you getting a return on your investment for the one-on-one coaching? And how much money do we save not losing people in employment or with just turnover? So two things, right? So productivity and engagement, like what's the savings there? And then secondly, what's the annual savings on the cost of that employee to either you lost that employee, and what is the cost of that loss, or did you retain that employee? And so one of the studies we did is we looked at a 5-year study across 5 different departments and found that we'd saved them, over $98 million in 5 years with just retention, not even counting the cost saving of engagement month to month. So I think probably the best way I'd say this is, I tell CFOs that, like, hey, listen, you got 2 big valves that you got to work with, right? You got kind of what's your profitability, what's your income, and what are your expenses. But I tell CFOs, like, you need to be highly aware. There's a third knob there, a third valve that you need to pay attention to, and that's how engaged your workforce is. Because you could turn, say your income's down, you're turning down, and now we've got to turn down because income's down. Now we have to really actually turn up and cut costs on our expenses. So we're kind of turning everything down. Then my argument is this third valve on your employee engagement, that could make or break a company in that kind of situation, because a lot of times in tough economies or when companies are tough, you tend to retain lower performers and you tend to lose your highest performers. That then can make the difference of, so you whittled this down to its basic core function or structure, that can often predict whether that actually works or not. Because if the people on that bus do not want to be there, or they feel overused or abused or not seen or not cared about, that is a lot of times where those pulling things back to their basic structure actually ends up being worse for the company. It's why during a lot of the corporate cuts in 2007, 2008, a lot of companies ended up not recovering from those cutbacks because they went too deep, too hard, too fast, and we learned a lot of lessons in 2007, 2008. That's why the economy seems to be slowing a little bit now, but you see companies being slow to lay people off as much as they can. Some of those come from the leaders that were back around in 07, 08, where the cuts were too fast, too deep. A lot of times for shareholders to increase PE or shareholder numbers, but they ended up probably the shortcut to understanding that is that they weren't thinking about culture at all in 07 and 08. And a lot of those companies did not come back to the health in the ways that they wanted. So you see a lot of smart leaders now being cautious to not overreact to the market.
What indicators do you look at which measure whether or not that person doesn't want to be in the bus?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that comes down to the listening. It is, if I just told you the most important level of any organization, it's simple. If you have a group of employees at your front line or at the basic core function of your business, and if I told you every one of those was affected by their engagement by their boss to a degree of 76%, then the most important layer for any company to focus on is actually having the best supervisors for the largest amount of productive workers at that company. You need the best people you can get for that first layer of supervisors. Then they need to feel supported by the best managers you can get that are supportive of those supervisors, and those supervisors wired to see the people at that company and what they can do, who they are. They have to be phenomenal. And sadly, I would say sort of executive maybe dysfunction or conflict is highly normal. It's kind of the norm, actually. Sometimes it's a fair amount of hubris, to sort of get to some of these places. But I would say, despite any dysfunction at an executive level, if there's high clarity at the baseline level between the workers in your first level of supervisors, those companies will outperform other companies all day long. So, and you sort of need that support throughout the whole organization, because if those first line supervisors don't feel cared about or supported by their managers, they leave too, or they're constantly turning over. So, I think, I told this CEO just recently, I said, listen, everything in business right now, it's culture, 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 and it should be culture, 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 I said, one day you're going to see a group of people that are on the bus, and they like each other so much on the bus, but maybe the bus breaks down, or the destination's lost or no longer achievable. But you're going to see a group of people that like each other on that bus so much, they're going to go, let's find a new destination, let's fix the bus, let's keep going. So that's why culture, I think, probably matters more than, I would say vision's probably more important. You kind of need the dream to kind of get everybody looking a particular direction. But other than that, culture is really like, will people stay on the bus? Do they like the bus? And so we try to measure, like, did we save money with these people on the bus? What bus is losing a lot of people on it? What bus is breaking down all the time? Do people have strong clarity about their roles, goals, and where the bus is headed? A lot of I think consulting is driving clarity as much as you can. So, good question.
Are you open to providing services overseas?
Yeah, I think if it was probably just, as funny as it sounds, Mexico, just because I feel like we share a border, we share people, great restaurants, both sides, great culture, great people. I mean, I'd be open to Tijuana, but I've really been lucky to have 90+% of my business right here in San Diego, and then the other 10 along the West Coast. So and I haven't. It's funny, I actually haven't even worked out in the East Coast either. It's all been sort of West Coast. Yeah, good question.
What advice would you give someone who is skeptical of strengths-based training?
Yeah, I would say be skeptical. Like, question it, push it, challenge it. Like, learn how it works, how it doesn't work, where you can trust it, where you can't, what it predicts, what it doesn't predict. I would probably welcome the skepticism. I think there were quite a few people in that one department that said, we are skeptical of this, but still brought us in anyway. When they saw our coaching evals, come back higher than anybody else has ever had for one-on-one meetings, I think they felt like, oh, well, I don't know how it works or why it works, but people seem to be highly engaged around the one-on-one coaching. So, so I think we can prove that. But I welcome I'm a pretty nerdy, my core, I'm a pretty nerdy guy, so I welcome the challenges. There's limits to the instrument. There's ways it doesn't work, so we try to be all very, very open and honest about all that as well.
Can you tell our viewers how they could contact Strengths Consulting Group?
Sure, yeah. I'm available directly at 858-414-7198, 858-414-7198. I am better by text than email. I think that's pretty widely known as well. But yeah, if you've got industry that you work in or a company that you feel like really is doing something amazing to help others, that's who we're looking for. So, yeah.
Good, thank you. And I just want to share something I learned from my trainings with Marc. To be at your best, lean into your strengths and encourage others to do the same. I want to thank you again, Marc, for
Thank you.
the interview. And thank you everyone for watching. If you found value from this episode, please hit the subscribe button. Thanks again and see you next time. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.